There's a little lock and a roll.
Recording in progress.
Okay, I'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. We will start with a roll call. McKee here, Fatima
Here.
Ehrenkamp
Here.
Nichols.
Here.
And, Commissioner Schultz, or Councilor Schultz is not here tonight. And we'll go on to the Pledge of Allegiance. If you'd stand and join me. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, agenda approval. Do we have any, I think we have a couple tweaks.
We have a couple tweaks. Thank you, Mayor. There are a couple additions. We have an addition of item 6B. If the council would like, we do have Amy Van Scheppen from County Commissioner Kevin Anderson's office here to speak to the council tonight. We have an addition of information related to a job description for item 7E. We have a minor change to resolution for the temporary liquor license. It is for St. Thomas, not the Country Days event.
That's 7B.
That's 7B. Yep, so just a minor, there's a clerical error on that. And then we do have some changes to a red line version to the PUD for Ravinia 13th edition, and changes to the encroachment agreement, and those are related to under item 8C. And those are related to some discussions with the city attorney. And then we do have the addition of item 10, this authorization to offer a job offer to an administrative assistant candidate.
Perfect. Is there anything from council?
Yeah, can I request to pull 6B off of the agenda?
Okay, so you want to, or just not add it, I suppose.
Not add it, yes.
Okay. Do you want to make a motion to approve the agenda without that?
Yes.
Okay. Do we have a second on that?
Second.
With all the additions other than 6B is the motion, I believe, right?
Yes.
Okay.
The agenda.
Do we have a second? Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay.
Aye.
Okay. I'll make a motion to approve the agenda with the additions of all of the items, including 6B.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Okay.
Can we have a discussion?
Yeah, let's have a discussion.
We'll have a discussion and talk about
Yes.
rescheduling.
Yes, I would like to make a motion that we reschedule 6B
Okay.
because we've had 5 minutes to digest the material. And the public has not seen, as far as I'm concerned, the public has not had a chance to digest the material.
Gotcha.
And it's unfair of we have one opportunity to have a back and forth with a governmental entity that we share a lot of responsibilities with. And for me to not have it in the packet it shortchanges our opportunity to have a good conversation.
Gotcha.
And I think a robust conversation is necessary because of our unique relationship with Hennepin County.
Gotcha. So,
I would ask that we reschedule it.
and have staff work with,
Yes.
to reschedule? Okay. So.
What have we done with the Watershed Commission presentations in the past? Do we allow those to go forward without seeing them ahead of time?
It wasn't in there ahead of time.
But in every case, I know we have it on the agenda, but I thought the presentation material wasn't always provided. Maybe I'm remembering that.
I don't know offhand.
It's up to the council and their prerogative if they would like to have it in the packet beforehand, and that, or if they would like to have it not beforehand, or if they'd be willing to have we have or have a presentation without materials that are in front of them. It's certainly, it's been a prerogative of the council on what the comfort level is.
I think we're kind of at an impasse in terms of just getting the agenda approved. So, John, you had mentioned you wanted, I don't know if there would be a motion involved for trying to reschedule. I mean, I suppose you
No,
could
you
make
can
one.
certainly. by
I did make a
consensus of
motion to reschedule 6B.
Okay, so to have staff work with the county, I guess, to reschedule it? or-
Reschedule, yes.
I would second that.
Okay,
In my mind, I see two different things here. I see the huge involvement with Hennepin County and such. While the Watershed District is there also, I think there's more of an impact and more public input related to the presentation that Hennepin County wants to give. I'd like to hear more from our residents about that information.
sounds good. So we do have a motion and a second. So all those in favor, is there any other discussion on that?
I'm fine rescheduling it. But I also see, I think we can make our point effectively by saying we'd prefer to see these things ahead of time and not require that somebody who spent time to come all the way out would have to do it again. Seems a little discourteous to me not to give them a hearing, but
It's,
I'm open.
it's equally discourteous to not have the materials in advance so we can have both sides of the conversation.
And in this case, I would say that we had had some discussion on whether or not we were going to be able to make it, and it just occurred after the packet
Gotcha.
deadline. So that, we hadn't communicated on presentation materials, so we weren't, hadn't confirmed that the presentation was going to
Gotcha.
proceed as we had.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I hear you. I think I don't necessarily think that it needs to be, but I'm okay with it being rescheduled if needs be. So I understand both your guys' sides here. So we'll have a vote on that. All those in favor of having staff reschedule, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Did you?
I will abstain.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Okay, then I will make a motion to approve the agenda with the additions of all the items discussed except for 6B, which was just voted to be rescheduled.
So
We have a
moved.
second.
Second.
Perfect. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Did I get all three of you there? Okay, perfect. On to commission representatives. We have Jay and Lisa online, I think, today. And then we have an open forum.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. If anyone is interested in speaking at open forum in the public here, or in the audience here, they can come up to the podium, state your name and address. If you're joining us virtually, you can press *9 if you're on a phone. Otherwise, if you're joining us via tablet, you can certainly press reactions and raise your hand, and we'll recognize you. Mayor, at this time, no one is raising their hand virtually.
Sounds good. Then we will go on to item 6, which we have a presentation from Ken for the Watershed on the budget.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor and Council, for letting me come up again tonight. I kind of enjoyed that last little discussion.
Yeah, thanks for coming out.
Thank you for having your stuff to us on time as a show of
Thank her for that.
courtesy.
This is actually sort of the last little presentation that I have planned on the Watershed, at least for the time being. And in the future, unless, you feel like you need more information on the Watershed function, I would probably wait until maybe there's a new council or whatever. But my whole intent on, I think this is maybe the fourth presentation, was just to create a little more awareness of how the Watershed operates and, what some of the resources are that are available, and just general awareness. So with that, tonight's topics will address the budget for 2023 and the member assessment for the city of Corcoran will be in your draft budget. You'll see that at your workshop, and I'll give you a little bit of a background on that. As a part of that discussion, I'll identify the major categories of the Watershed budget, what the functions are, what the member city dues are, and then talk a little bit about the levy. The Watershed does submit a levy to Hennepin County. Hennepin County generally adopts that, rubber stamps it, and adopts it as a part of its general levy. I think in my first maybe presentation, I indicated that the watershed is included on the last line item on the budget mailer that we all receive. You know, we receive that sets out all the various categories, and it has sort of other miscellaneous at the bottom, which is a catch-all. We're actually not in that. I misspoke that evening. We're actually a part of the county's general levy. Then I'll finish up with just describing a half a dozen of the funding opportunities or resources that the watershed provides for water quality projects within the watershed. So with regard to the 2023 budget, the watershed passes its budget early in the year so that we can pass it along to the member cities in time for them to conduct their workshops. It's a challenge for the watershed because we have to pass our budget before we get our audit. So we're always dealing, the only audited information we have generally tends to be 2 years old, and that's been a challenge in the past. One of the things we've been trying to do is to institute some more, I would say, sort of standard business-like approaches to the budgeting process at the watershed. The watershed budget is just over $1 million this year, so relative to the city budgets, it's not as big. Relative to Maple Grove, Plymouth, it's, sofa change. But there's a lot of low-hanging fruit there in terms of business practices. We talk a lot about best management practices for water, and I keep ringing the bell that best management practices apply to organizations too, whether it's a private industry or government organization. You always have to be mindful, and that, of course, is what the council members or the commissioners bring to that body is some of their real-life experiences that maybe provide better practices. Jessica, do you have
Yes,
the...
I will pull those
I
up.
want to just put the
Go through them.
budget document up. I hadn't intended that the memo be included in the packet, so if you took the
Sorry.
time to read it,
Sorry
thank
about
you.
that.
I was just going to summarize the budget itself, but you got the full tilt. That was my fault. I didn't communicate that clearly with Jessica, and she included the whole package. I'll just do it for.
Give me
don't
just
worry
one
about it,
second.
Jessica.
It's
One thing that I
pulling.
do want to show them is the city assessment page. Remember that was
I'll
about
pull that
the
one.
fourth page of stuff in the package. Like I said, the annual budget's about $1 million now. Out of that $1 million, $134,000 is general administrative expense, administrative support, legal, accounting, auditing, insurance, that type of thing. The watershed, actually the cities through the watershed is required by law to engage in an education outreach. So the various watersheds in Hennepin County, it's called the West Metro Watershed Alliance, WMWA. They collectively participate in an education outreach, and we actually have a staff person who goes to grade schools and conducts classes on water ecology. Our contribution to that was $13,500 in this current budget. We're required to do watershed management planning every 10 years, I believe. We're required to do that. So we set aside money every year to do that, $14,000. The watershed's involved in quite a bit of stream monitoring. We partner with Hennepin County, U.S. Geological Survey, and Three Rivers Park District to maintain monitoring stations on the creeks and rivers. And our budget for that annually for this year is $55,000. Then the two bigger items in our budget are project review. That's we budgeted $270,000 for that this year. All but about $60,000 of that is recovered through escrow. So we transitioned over to an escrow fee process a couple of years ago when developers come in and they submit their plans. We do the technical review and then we make the recommendations to you and the planning commission. For a number of years, the watershed just had a flat fee type of approach to that, which wasn't good. And what happened was the cities and the taxpayers were essentially subsidizing a lot of the developer review. So we shifted over to an escrow type of process, which ironically the commissioners who had been on city councils were more accustomed to. It was interesting to find out that, staff were more comfortable with a flat fee, it's easy to administer. And the commissioners who didn't have council experience didn't really question that. So when we had 2 or 3 commissioners who were former council members in the cities, we were all saying, whoa, time out. We got to convert to an escrow type of system. So that's really improved our accounting and the integrity of our fee system. So those are the major expense items. Oh, I'm sorry, the final major expense item is our capital improvement projects and grants. So we budget for all of the money that we serve as a conduit for on projects within the watershed, and that, oh, you have it up, okay.
Yep.
So you see at the bottom, that's 500, it's line 87, $525,000. So our operations constitute about $488,000, and then the money that we conduit through on projects is about $525,000. So you can see actually the majority of our annual budget is to serve as a conduit for projects within the watershed, and that's the $1,014,000. One of the things that we're undertaking right now is to create a reserve fund policy. The watershed has never had it. The watershed accounting for a 3-page, 2.5-page budget is phenomenally complicated due to the fund balances that the watershed maintains. So we've been working to create a reserve policy without really realizing that the watershed has been maintaining a reserve in the nature of about 1.5 years worth of operating expenses. And a few of the commissioners have said that this is really necessary, and it isn't, but we don't have a policy to govern that, and it's been complicated by the fact that again, we're budgeting without our most recent audit. So we're not seeing the variation that we end the prior year in. And as an example, a year ago at this time, we collectively decided to run a deficit budget to drain our reserve a little bit while we were working on this policy. We still ended up with a net surplus last year. So, you know, despite our best intentions of trying to drain the reserve a little bit, we added back to the reserve, I think $17,000 were our pre-audit figures. So we're working on a policy, and what that'll eventually do is reduce member assessments, city assessments, and it'll provide a little more integrity to the number that we're giving to the member cities. We're not going to do knee-jerk, cost of living was 3%, therefore we're passing along 3%. We're just not going to do it. So that's the goal of the reserve policy, and you'll be seeing that maybe next year when we get the member assessment. If you could put up the slide, Jessica, with the member city dues. And this one always, I think, has to go all the way to the bottom. Okay, and unfortunately, the folks behind, well, I guess you might be able to see if you turn around. As you know, Corcoran is the largest city in terms of geographical area in the watershed, and we're one of the smallest in terms of tax base. So the way we set, once we determine our member assessment number, what we need for operations, then it's allocated based on tax capacity within the watershed. So Corcoran actually is 28% of the geographic area in the watershed, but we only represent 7.5% of the tax capacity. By contrast, Maple Grove is about 20% of the geographic area, and they represent 47% of the tax capacity in the watershed. Plymouth is 3.4% of the geographic area, 12% of the tax capacity. So we have 8 times or 9 times the geographic area that Plymouth does, and but they have 50% more of the tax capacity, which just makes sense. Our percentage will go up. It's gone up 0.5% a year over the last couple of years, and it'll continue to rise relative to the other cities as we continue to develop. But the reason I point this out is, and this has always been sort of true at the commission meetings, there's a sense that Corcoran represents a big chunk of the watershed, and we're sort of funding a small slice of the pie. But on the flip side, if there are opportunities or a desire to do things in the city of Corcoran, we're getting the participation from a lot of tax capacity from Maple Grove and Plymouth to work on water issues in this city. And that's sort of the message I want to deliver on that. We're still fairly early in our development curve relative to the other cities to be tackling significant water projects. We just are. But the day will come eventually. And,
Can I ask a question about that?
sure.
What is your messaging? Your messaging is that, is there anything for us? So the message is that we're a smaller part of the budget, a bigger part of the geography.
We have a lot of the water that
Yeah, it goes down.
Yeah, yeah.
So you're saying that's an
We're sending
opportunity?
a lot of water along, and our neighbors are funding a lot of our operations to monitor, improve that water.
The water that ultimately ends up in their town.
Right.
And are they okay with that generally?
It is what it is.
Oh, so there's not a beef or anything?
Oh, no,
It's just
no.
a fact
No,
that,
it's
yeah,
not a beef, it's just a fact.
okay, okay.
But
I thought there was something more to
No,
that.
No, and it's still, even at the commission meeting, I'm glad you kind of asked the question, John, is that we tend to be parochial, I think. Even at those commission meetings, we tend to think about our own city. And it's really hard to sort of shift gears and think, no, wait a second, this is a separate jurisdiction defined by the water itself. This isn't Maple Grove, Dayton, Corcoran, Medina. This is this water environment, and we all have a role in that. So I think a lot of people sort of get the sense that let's try not to be parochial about how we look at the resource and the cost of mitigating problems or enhancing the resource. Let's be a little broader in how we do it. But maybe an analogy is how the county approaches countywide services, countywide sheriff services. We all support that effort. County has to apply those services in an equitable way across all sorts of jurisdictions, and they have to make those value decisions on where they meet the needs of the county. So it's a little bit like that with the watershed. And I don't want to hang on this too much, but I just wanted to sort of show you that essentially for the life of the watershed, Maple Grove has paid the bill. They've paid about 50% of all of the non-fee related costs of the operation of the watershed. Okay, I want to move on. Our levy that we're going to submit to Hennepin County for inclusion in county taxes this year is $291,000. The levy covers our capital improvement projects. Cities that want to do a capital improvement project for other organizations submit that to review with the Watershed. The Watershed Technical Advisory Committee, which is the subcommittee that's comprised of all of the city engineers, water engineers, the staff representatives, that's the technical review group. They actually review these requests or proposals for capital improvement projects, and if they're acceptable, they recommend them to the commission as a whole. The commission as a whole will adopt or deny that recommendation. Then they get sort of slotted into our forecasted capital improvement budget. That's a forward-looking budget. And we then submit our levy to Hennepin County based on what we anticipate our need will be for the upcoming year. So for the upcoming year, like I said, we'll ask the county to levy $291,000. That gets applied across the entire watershed. Corcoran residents will bear 7.5% of that, basically, that $291,000. The watershed's maximum levy in any given year is $750,000. So you can see we're not really even close to what the cap would be for what we could levy on projects. I just want to talk about the three main areas of funding that exist in the watershed. I already mentioned the capital improvement project program. That generally applies to projects having a value over $100,000. They've typically been stream bank restoration projects. One that's close to home is City of Plymouth restored Elm Creek near the high school. Another one that's had a lot of success is the Mill Pond up in Champlin, where the City of Champlin has done a lot to restore that area. We partnered with Three Rivers Park District on Cohasset Park and some projects they've done on the Pearl River up there. So that's an example of those types of projects. If a project gets approved, the Elm Creek Watershed Commission will fund 25% of the project value. That's that levy. And then the the applicant will fund 75%. So in the case of the, say, Plymouth project where they restored Elm Creek, Plymouth was responsible for 75% of that. But the city also applied for other grants. So it's not the case that 75% has to come out of your general budget or your public works budget. You can fund that in other ways. It's the city's obligation or the applicant's obligation to produce that additional funding, but the watershed will do 25%. The projects must actually improve water quality. They can't be just maintenance. So when the city of Corcoran, how long, Kevin, did you? due to the request on the drainage.
We did the downtown project, downtown stormwater,
Yeah,
and there was an element of drainage and an element of water quality. We only got credit for the water quality component, not
so the city of Corcoran submitted a request for funding on the downtown drainage area, and because part of it was maintenance, that part would not get funded through the water, through the capital improvement program. But because we enhanced or improved the water, the drainage and the maintenance, part of that was funded through the watershed. An interesting program the city of Plymouth proposed, and we had some debate and we approved it, was the inclusion of a new generation of street sweepers that have been demonstrated to greatly reduce the phosphorus and nitrates going into the waterways. And that was a shift because prior to that, all the capital improvement projects were actually physical land-based projects. And there was a lot of debate, and we finally agreed, no, actually better equipment that improves water quality, if it's a piece of capital equipment, could qualify for this funding, and there's a lot of stuff. But at some point, Kevin's going to come back and tell you about that, because I can imagine the city will be involved in that. But again, we're still maybe a period of time before we get to that.
the next equipment CIP will come up.
Okay, there you go. And then finally, the capital, we'll set aside money for doing some watershed assessments, and you'll hear more about that, I think, at the workshop. The watershed just approved, and this is the first year that they had a new sort of annual fund for applicants to engage in projects that create best management practices for waterways. And that fund is $150,000 a year. Municipalities can qualify for funding on projects up to $100,000, and that's a 50-50 match. So if the municipality is engaging in best management practices projects, annually the watershed will grant up to $100,000 matching the city 50-50. The other $50,000 a year, and this is pretty interesting, and we're still waiting to see how this shakes out, is that the watershed will grant to private landowners within the watershed up to $50,000 a year for best management practices improvements on their land, and that's a 100% reimbursement up to $50,000. So if you're a private landowner and you've got a water course on your land and you can demonstrate some sort of improvement that you intend to do that benefits the watershed, so for example, reduction of silt, runoff, that kind of thing, some sort of mitigation, creation of buffers, for example, around wetlands, and you undertake that as a private property owner, the watershed will fund up to $50,000 to do that. And it's in our first year, and there's a committee that's responsible for reviewing those types of proposals. And I'm not involved in that, so I can't tell you where that stands. Then finally, just as a matter of sort of broader operation, the watershed will support applications for grant requests for the Legacy to Clean Water Act, Legacy grants, which is the, you're familiar with those. There's a Twin City metro area, it's called Watershed-Based Implementation Funding, WBIF. It's directed just for metro area watersheds, and that can fund research. I think I actually put in a request that the South Fork Rush Creek sub-watershed assessment be funded through that program. So if we get council agreement to include that in the budget, then I'd put a marker in for that we would get funding support from the watershed. And I think Kevin might talk about that when you had your budget workshop. I don't want to take your time tonight to talk about that, but I could come back to the workshop to talk about that. So that's that program. And then finally, Hennepin County, we will coordinate with Hennepin County's natural resources grants, and they also will fund private property owner projects up to $25,000, and they will fund larger multi-project property projects up to $100,000. So there's a whole array of opportunities, and they're all grant funding, so obviously a stakeholder has to participate and provide funding as well, or go out and seek funding. In a lot of cases, these projects have multiple funding sources. So for example, like I said, with the Elm Creek restoration that Plymouth did, they had grant funding, and they didn't that didn't come out of the city general fund, the entire 75%. And I think anything, if and when the city is ready to do projects and seek funding, then it would be wise to sort of convene a group to look on, and the Watershed, again, can provide the technical resources and support on even applying for grants. And then you sort of build a project, you build a funding profile, and you have your various grant sources, and if it all comes through, you do your project, and if any one of the legs of the stool isn't there, then the project doesn't go forward, and that's kind of typical for all these things work. That's it, I'm done.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, any questions, whatever, and when you have any kind of budget questions or projects maybe that involve the watershed, if you want input, I'm happy to come up. I'm not gonna come up unless you request that, but.
Appreciate it, yeah, well.
Can I ask questions?
Sure.
I want you to come on a regular schedule basis. This is so important and has such an impact on our town. And I appreciate all the work you put into this.
Well, I'm gonna, a little bit off script. And because I have the benefit of the background of sitting where you guys have been, and now have been interacting with the folks from Plymouth, Maple Grove, Medina, whatever, we're still relatively early in our evolution in terms of these types of issues. That's just the reality. And I think John can confirm that for most of the time I was here, this stuff just wasn't even on the radar. We had, there were so many more significant noisy issues that we had to deal with. And it shouldn't be a luxury issue, water quality, but in terms of allocation of your time and energy and resources, that's kind of the way it comes down. But I sense that maybe the community is on the cusp of, as it develops into a new phase or era in its, sort of social, political, cultural, economic evolution, this stuff will become a little more, come to the fore a little bit.
And I think people need the awareness of some of the projects, the impacts, and the, I guess, the cooperative efforts of the watershed and Hennepin County. Like, that's important to keep in front of everybody too, especially if we have a manure ordinance, as you've advocated for. People are going to want funding sources for that.
As the public space in the southeast part of Corcoran develops, the recreational space and say the trail network and some of the park spaces, and people have a little more sort of immediate proximity to some of the waterways that might have issues. As people start taking the trail past the creek and they notice that the creek doesn't smell nice, then that's going to be more important. That's just the way it works.
Makes sense.
Anyway.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, then we are on to consent agenda, which consists of 7A through E. Did anyone want to pull anything? Nope. Going once, going twice. Okay, then I will entertain a motion to approve consent agenda items 7A through E.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Perfect. On to planning business. 8A is a public hearing, so we'll have a public comment opportunity on 8B and C. We'll go ahead and do that now.
Perfect. Anyone in the audience can come and to the podium and state your name and address. Anyone joining us virtually can press *9 if you're joining us on a phone, or click the
Come on, Paul.
and raise your hand for the public comment opportunity. Mayor, at this time, no one's raising their hand.
Okay. Then we will go on to 8A, which is again a public hearing for an easement vacation.
Perfect, thank you, Mayor. Natalie, I'm going to turn it over to Natalie, and I do have a brief slideshow here.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have just a few slides. The request is from Blair Brown, who's looking to vacate an easement at 22640 Oakdale Drive that runs across essentially the middle of her property. If you go to the next slide, it's kind of a zoomed in approach. So it's a little north of their house. It's based on an old lot line from the original plat. Because later lots were consolidated and didn't go through a formal plating process. This drainage and utility easement was never dealt with, and now they're looking to potentially build a structure within that easement area and are looking for it to be vacated. Staff did not find any concerns with this request. So go ahead, next slide. Recommendation is to open the public hearing and then move to adopt Resolution 2022-89, approving the vacation.
Perfect. Okay, we'll go ahead and open the public hearing.
Perfect. Anyone wanting to speak in the audience can come to the podium. Anyone wanting to speak virtually for the public hearing can press *9 or click reactions and raise your hand if you're on a smartphone, tablet, or other electronic device. Mayor, at this time, no one is raising their hand.
Okay. Can I get a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I think we got all four. Okay, any discussion on this, or does someone want to make a motion? Sounds like there was no issues found by staff on it.
Make a motion to approve item A.
Second.
More Jeremy.
You guys, I think Jeremy edged them out. Okay. All those, or any further discussion on it? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, on to 8B, which is final plat, final PUD, and final PUD plan for Tavera 4th Edition.
Perfect. Thank you, Mayor and Council. We have Kendra here.
I
to
do just
present.
have a couple of slides. I can just walk through it. It's the 4th edition, but it also includes the grading of the rest of the project, which will allow us to continue to work to eliminate the stockpiles. It's 80 single-family homes, 42 twin homes, and 11 outlots in the 4th edition. If you go to the next slide, it shows the 4th edition. And the dark lines on this image are trails, and the next slide. The one item that I think is important for the council to have some discussion about, because there was a difference from what the preliminary approvals required and what the Parks Commission asked for when they reviewed it the second time. And so the plans were sent to Parks Commission because the original approvals required that Lennar provide a parking lot with 6 to 8 stalls and then wind a trail throughout the site. And we wanted the Parks Commission to look at how that trail wound through the site. What they actually recommended was a realignment of that trail where the light green line is, so to follow along the north side, or the south side of Outlot F. And then recommended removal of a trail that they had required before, and the council had required before, on the north side from Tamarack, and then asked that instead of the trail crossing at the street intersection, which was a previous requirement, that it cross at what would be a future mid-block. So I raise that because staff believes that the original recommendations were correct and we should keep those, but certainly the council could choose to adopt the planning, or the Parks Commission's new recommendation, deviating from that original approval. So that's really at your discretion. It's important though, because we've already got the trail easement for the south side of Outlot E there. We want to just make sure that we're planning and they're moving ahead with what they need to do. So some direction on that. Next slide. Otherwise, this is the actual plat for the lots, but all of the area that's in the outlots and to the east in, I forget the name of that other outlot, not shown on this page, would be graded as part of this project. So with that, we do recommend approval of the two resolutions. The Parks direction would be added to, whatever the council's direction is tonight on the Parks would be added to Resolution 2287 as 7D. Just
7D?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So do we want to start on the Parks item? I did have a quick question if we could pull up that map, that one, thank you. It looks like it's actually highlighted there, so I must not have noticed it in my own notes, but the connection from Tamarack that staff's proposing, that would just go essentially from the road to the back of the house is not a full connection down to that?
Yes.
Okay.
To allow some open space, I think was the thought.
Yeah, or like a playground or something to kind of connect it to the, like if there's a feature right there that eventually, then you still have access to it, but yeah.
What kind of surface is it?
The trail?
That's a bituminous trail.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's a trail to nowhere.
Well,
the
there'll
open
be,
space.
there'll be facilities in Outlot F eventually. That was part of the reason I believe the Parks and Trail Commission didn't want the winding trail because it allowed for
Yep.
for more facilities in the middle, because right now it kind of cuts through, so there really wouldn't be much room for a playground was their concern.
Oh, so eventually it'll connect to something.
Yes, I would expect the Parks Commission, when they put, I was just going to clarify that, we would make Lennar build the green portion of the trail, and I would expect when the playground goes in, there will be sidewalk connections, for example, from the parking lot to the swing set, from this stub trail to the, ball court, whatever.
So you go trail to whatever park facility to other trail on the south side.
The city would, though, as part of the
Yep.
parks plan, make those internal connections.
Yep.
Yeah, okay, so I'm just thinking if you're riding your bike on that trail and all of a sudden it just,
Until then?
like, well, no, even after, like, the trail just ends at a playground.
Yeah.
Isn't there gonna be it just
Although-
seems odd.
Well,
Yeah,
it'll
Are you really
continue, right?
biking
So-
along a long trail to get to there? I think that's more just getting access to it from, because there's not really much of a path beyond that to the north. You could be going on the sidewalk in the neighborhood.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
My understanding is this is the Diamond Lake Regional Trail, or it will connect to that. Is that true?
That's correct. The green that comes up from the south crosses at the intersection and then comes along the south side of F and up. That is the regional trail. The little stub off Tamarack isn't part of that.
Yeah,
but
it's
you
more
are
like a
absolutely
neighborhood
correct.
access point to whatever that park amenity is going to be.
Oh, okay.
So it won't be a trail to nowhere. The Tamarack insert will go to a park when that ends up getting constructed.
Oh, okay.
But to fill in on what
Should
the,
have a sidewalk around the whatever entity. I'm not gonna get hung up on it. I'm fine with
What?
it.
Like you're talking about just, it's not really showing up, but going around on Tamarack?
It doesn't matter. I'm content.
Sounds good. So in terms of the alignment of the trail, staff, other than adding that access, I guess, and then the mid-block crossing, the staff and parks recommendation were the same?
Yes.
Gotcha. Any thoughts on that?
so the discussion in the Parks Commission was thinking about that trail from a trail user perspective. You wouldn't want to have to do a sharp right, go to a street crossing, cross, and then come back to get back on the trail until that road connects, when that might be a safety issue. It made more sense during that discussion to have a straight cut across. Now, if the area behind there ever develops and the road extends, maybe that safety picture forces you to realign the trail, or maybe you put in a crosswalk with some flashing lights and some speed bumps. But the thought was, let's try to make the trail as usable as we can and avoid having a couple different dog legs to get back to the northerly portion.
Gotcha. So and your thoughts on,
So I would support continuing with what the Parks and Trails Commission recommended as far as that spur connecting that, sort of the terminus of that U. Maybe we keep the easement so that when that road goes through, we've got the space to put in the trail that would loop around if we want to go back to the corner. But I wouldn't spend 20 years with a couple of sharp U-turns if we don't see an imminent need for that road.
gotcha, so you'd be in favor of keeping the easement around there, but putting a connection straight through?
Right.
Okay. Any other thoughts on that?
In agreement, that
Yeah, it makes
makes a lot of sense.
Works. For me, I'm trying to think of what we'd need to amend here specifically for that. Besides, you said 7D.
So, like,
Yes.
this is the recommendation.
Yes.
So I think what, Mr. Mayor, if I could.
Yeah.
I would add a 7D that the park shall be redesigned to, the only thing that they're doing is to realign the trail connection along the east and south side of Outlot F and, the west and south side of Outlot F as recommended by the Parks Commission, to add a mid-block crossing as recommended by the Parks Commission, and then to make the trail on the north side of Outlot E an easement and not be constructed. I believe that was the
Yes, that
recommendation.
sounds
So we can write that up.
perfect. Does someone want to make a motion to amend this resolution to that effect?
I will move to amend as recited by staff.
Second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, all good. The next item that we really didn't get into in the overview was the trash enclosures. And I think I had some questions on that. I don't know if anyone else did, in terms of what material we're talking. Maybe the applicant, Paul, if you want to address that.
Sure, good evening, Mayor, members of the council. The trash enclosures, optional trash enclosures, I should add, are made of resin. It's an all-weather material. They're very common to the ones that you see for sale at Lowe's or Home Depot. The example that we provided are ones that have been submitted for review in the past. So just to provide a little bit of background information, most of our residents keep the trash cans in their garages. If they elect to not have the trash cans in the garages, this has been something that we recommend to them. And like I said, I just provided an example to staff. They're typically about 6 by 3, 6 feet wide, 3 feet deep, to fit a couple of trash cans. And they are needed to be submitted for review and approval to our ACC committee. So there is kind of an architectural review to make sure that they're in conformance with kind of the character of the colors and materials already being used in the community. So,
Gotcha.
if there are any other questions, I can answer those. But that's kind of the gist. It's just an option that's afforded to the homeowners if they choose not to store the trash cans in the garages.
Gotcha. And I'm assuming that would have to comply with like a side setback would typically be.
So what we put in condition number 8 of Resolution 22-86 is exactly that, Mr. Mayor, that they are permitted, provided they conform with the accessory structure setback material and accessory structure standards in Section 130.
Gotcha. Any other thoughts on that?
I had a question on that for staff. Code seems to say for accessory structures, they can't be constructed of plastic materials. What's staff's position as to whether these meet that requirement? If they are a resin structure?
I think I don't have the code in front of me, but I think the plastic section is really about the tarp things that people put over the boats. I think it was a plastic or, I forget the language. I think I know
Canvas.
what section, yeah. That was specifically related to that. I don't know enough about this material to answer that today. What I would say is we have a lot of plastic fences that comply with our accessories, we believe comply with our accessory structure. And if it's that type of material, I think it would probably comply. But we'd have to look at it specifically, and I don't have that info today.
Because a second question I would have, it's in the resolution currently. I thought I read somewhere that staff's recommendation was to not approve that as without some of the additional information potentially.
Well, and I think what he was trying to say is we're not recommending approval without additional information, so not a blanket approval, and that's why we wrote it to say it's approved if you can comply.
Gotcha.
With those standards. It was not written very well in the
Oh, no,
report.
that's fine.
Apologize.
No problem. That makes sense.
Because we intentionally have a relatively high bar, I think, on the accessory structure materials. So I would be disinclined to have like a Rubbermaid container for trash cans be acceptable. I could see if it's a more permanent structure, it's a higher end material, that's more likely to sort of accent the architectural standards that we're asking for in the PUD. That seems to make sense to me, but something that you would get at a hardware store probably isn't in keeping with.
Garbage cans are not allowed to be stored outside in Corcoran, correct?
I actually don't
Typically
know.
an HOA thing.
The
for sure.
HOA does not allow it.
HOA does not allow it, and
I don't know if-
there's some,
I don't know if we have a code on that.
Well, garbage can, I guess the thing I think about is garbage cans are also made of resin. And it's
True.
like,
That's true.
you're storing a garbage can inside a big garbage can,
Yes.
and I don't know the difference.
Our code
Fair
says
point.
no exterior storage of trash or garbage permissible except when it's in an accessory building enclosed by walls and a roof, or enclosed containers within a totally screened area. So I
Yeah.
think this does accomplish that,
Well,
yeah.
I guess.
I don't know if I'd call those walls or a roof,
Is there a minimum accessory building requirement in Corcoran?
as far as size.
No?
Minimum square footage?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
No, there's not.
I'm just asking, like it's, I don't know. I guess technically, it's a sneaky way to store garbage cans outside because they don't want to put them inside the garage.
Right. Yeah, I guess it's, do we think it will
It's a garbage can inside a garbage can, big garbage can.
essentially,
So I'll move to strike that from the approval.
to remove 8? Okay. So to remove item 8 from,
I would be open to other materials, but until we see something in a subsequent phase PUD amendment,
gotcha.
maybe we just,
I don't want to
Put a
encourage
pause on it
garbage
for now.
cans being stored outside
well, they
in
wouldn't.
Yeah.
in a building slightly bigger than a garbage can.
Yeah,
I think that goes against the whole spirit of the thing.
yeah. That makes sense. So we do have a motion. Do we have a second for that?
I'll second.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Unanimous? Then, did anyone have any other items of significance? The grading issue, allowing grading on the rest of the site. I think to avoid some of the stockpile issues that we had before, which is gone now, mostly. Certainly looks like it from the street at least. Everyone okay with that?
Yeah.
Thank you for meeting that commitment.
Yeah.
Mayor, members of the council, I just wanted to kind of reiterate that I heard you, we heard you loud and clear in the fall. And so as we work through the stormwater and grading, the intention is to get as far as we can on the grading this year and get into the development. And we have worked through that and the ability to start that with staff. Hopefully we can get your support tonight so that we can get going and start using that stockpile on the north side. It is a pretty big grading job, as you probably imagine. So the sooner that we can get through this here, and then we're working with the Watershed to get approval so that we can start that earthwork on the north side and get as far as we possibly can with it. But it is a pretty sizable job, so we're a little later in the season than we'd like to be. So if, just want to put that out there and let you know that we're working to try to do that. And, yeah, I drove through the third edition as well, and it looks like those stockpiles are pretty much gone. That area's almost graded out, so trying to work through it as best as possible.
We appreciate it.
Thank you.
I think I'm fine with the grading like that.
Quick question, not related to the grading,
Go
if
for
I
it.
can. Timeline on completing the houses that are up, as far as siding, those kind of things? Totally off subject, you might not be the expert, but
The homes that are under construction right now,
the ones that are up, Tyvek wrapped for a number of months now and stuff.
yeah, I don't have.
Is there a timeline on those things? or-
I don't have the closing dates. I know that we call it our cycle time. Before the pandemic and before supply constraints, it was anywhere from, I want to say 90 to 120 days. So, 4 months, give or take. I believe that's been stretched to like 6 or 8. The ones that are getting built, obviously we want to complete them. And I don't know what the closing dates are on those for people to move in. I can get that information.
The ones that are built have
The ones that are
closing
built-
dates and stuff?
Yeah, the ones that are
Okay.
built, the intention would be to, again, I don't know what the contract dates are.
I know,
when
I
people
just-
move in, But the intention would be to finish those and get the people moved in and, in compliance with whatever date has been discussed between the prospective buyer and Lennar, and I can get you those.
I don't need them, I just-
6 to 8 months from start to finish and closing of a home, so it's kind of got a little bit stretched out, but the intention is to keep those moving.
I've made comments. I've got residents stating we're building Tyvek City Corcoran, and it's a reflection on you and other builders of, we've got homes erected, windows on Tyvek wrapped for a number of months, and I understand the situation and those kind of things. I just, how many more are gonna go up before? I mean, is it just gonna be a rolling Tyvek homes kind of deal? And I know there's issues, but
And we're trying to procure the siding as much as possible. That has been one of the things that's been delayed, unfortunately, over the last 6 months to a year with some of the vinyl materials that we use in the siding and textures and colors. So
okay.
I can get you more information on that, but.
Don't need it, I
we do
just
wanna keep-
giving you guys a heads up. Let us know what you need ahead of time, not after the fact, and people are noticing it, and we don't need your names dragged through the mud. I don't want a poor quality home built and those kind of things, and bare wood is not a good thing, and Tyvek is not waterproof. You know all these things. It'd be nice to see completion sooner, and you're dealing with that, so thank you.
Thank you.
All right, is there anything else? Otherwise, someone want to make a motion? I will entertain a motion to approve Resolution 2022-86, approving the final PUD plan, and 2022-87, approving final plat and development contract.
So moved.
As amended.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Mr. Mayor, I
Yes.
voted for that.
Okay.
Can I interrupt with something we didn't talk about
Sure.
earlier?
Yeah.
There was something in the packet about having a 10-acre minimum for a PUD that none of us answered that question.
That,
Yeah,
For the
during
work session?
During the work session. That was one of the questions that you had.
I could send out an email if you guys wanted to discuss it that way.
sure, or did you have a specific thought on it?
Well, I was wondering, since she asked, it was one of the questions that did not get answered during
Yeah,
the
it's true.
special session.
Yeah.
So I wondered if you wanted an answer quick before we
If we want to.
adjourn.
Sure, certainly.
Sure.
So, council, if they'd like
Well,
to discuss it.
what are we thinking?
Did you have any? are you-
No, I don't have any thoughts.
Gotcha.
I put a big question mark because I'm curious myself.
Yeah, I kind of wrestled with it too, because the thing that was proposed as an example was a 10-acre minimum, right?
That seems to be the most common.
Gotcha.
Again, I tried to do as much research as possible, and I know I just scratched the surface, but that seemed to be the minimum that you saw for PUDs, but then a lot of places also had waivers for smaller sites. If there was an extenuating circumstance where it may have made sense, like if it was redevelopment or infill development, where it might make sense to have a smaller site, but just,
I'm trying to think what the main thing that's helping with, other than, maybe making it a little more limited.
I think the 4/5 would accomplish the same objective in terms of ensuring higher quality in the proposal.
Yeah,
And I don't think we get so many that we want to, cut off half the Pareto. So I think it's okay to not have a 10-acre minimum personally,
yeah, I mean, have we,
at least at this point.
can't really think of any that we've had so far. I'm sure there's a couple sites that might be coming up that I could see in the future, but I don't know if we've had any that small yet.
I will say there's a property owner that isn't necessarily looking at a PUD, but he's looking at redeveloping of just a few acres, and would, in my mind, probably would need a PUD for it to make sense.
Gotcha.
So again, that's not necessarily what he's proposing, and it's very beginning stages, but if, that might not make sense to have something so small be a PUD.
Yeah, I think the 4/5 accomplishes the main objective that we're trying to do. I don't know if the 10-acre minimum or a minimum isn't really doing much, but I'm not,
I guess it
inherently opposed to it. It just,
sounds like it's not a really big deal.
yeah, I don't think so. I think there's other ways to accomplish some of the bigger policy things that we're wanting to do. I don't know if that helps as much.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
See what that's an example of? Attention deficit advantage?
Like it. Okay, on to 8C, which is PUD amendment for Ravinia. That's all I wrote in my notes.
Welcome back, Paul.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. We do have a PUD amendment for Ravinia. Go ahead and turn it over to Kendra.
Sure. This is something I think the mayor got involved with over the winter, I believe, and have been working with the Tabors, and at the time it was Lennar on this site to provide a screening fence on the Black Oak or the Lennar side of the lot line. The application would allow, is to approve the fence along the lot line and in our public right-of-way to provide screening. It includes the requirement for an encroachment agreement. The packet went out before I was able to coordinate with the city attorney, so on your desk, there is a redlined version of Resolution 2288, as well as a redlined version of the encroachment agreement. If you go to the next slide, you'll see there's a retaining wall, and unbeknownst to me, we did have an existing encroachment agreement for that retaining wall, but it was written very specifically for the retaining wall, and my conversation with the city attorney today is that we still need a separate agreement that allows the fence, both on this property and in the public right-of-way. So that's the revisions to the encroachment agreement that's in front of you tonight.
Gotcha. Thank you.
May I ask a question about that?
Go for it.
We just had a neighbor-to-neighbor issue where they wanted a higher fence between two houses, and we said no. How is this different?
I think part of the aspect, or part of the history of this is
I know the history.
the what we allowed necessarily, or what we allowed with the PUD, how close it is to the property. It was allowable, maybe not the best in retrospect situation to have approved. And I think this is kind of an imperfect solution to a longstanding problem, but it's an improvement from what the current thing is. I think Lennar would like it. I think the Tabors would like it. I think
We had discussed this at a previous meeting, just the idea of bringing something forward to resolve the issue between the screening issue.
Mhm.
And so it is, addressing it through a PUD refines the scope of our ability to do.
It's not permanent.
It's not a permanent, and something that would be something that you could do anywhere else in the city. It's a very narrow scope.
I think the other side of it is there's not a safety triangle issue here because it's not a through street. So really it's coming up to the edge of a property. And the only way that it would become a through street is if that property developed. So I don't think it has the same kind of safety and visibility concern that you would have in other parts of the city.
So for me, let's say that one of the parties sells the,
well, there'd only be one party that.
no, what if the
What if the
other
home
landowner?
that's there?
Yeah, now they
on
got a
the Lennar
6-foot
side?
fence in their yard. They
That's it,
can't
what-
get rid of it.
Okay, I guess I'm not following.
So there's a Tabors.
Yep.
Then there's the adjacent landowner.
So what if they didn't want it?
And the people move in, and all of a sudden who wants a 6-foot fence on their property? That's sort of the point of having the code in there in the first place. Like, just because two neighbors agree on something that is against the code, doesn't mean we should be okay with just modifying the code. Like, if me and my neighbor decide that we're gonna put a 30-foot fence between us,
Right.
then we should be able to do it, because we don't get along, or someone else drew the line bad, or the barn is too close, like, we have,
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
and then someone else moves into my house,
Mm-hmm.
and all of a sudden they got a 30-foot fence, and they're like, well, this is way against the code. Well, the previous owners agreed to it, you're stuck.
Whose property is it on?
This one?
It'd
So this one
Be
is
on-
on the, so the Tabor, it is on the Black Oak Lane property and not on the Gleason Road parcel.
do- Oh,
I
yeah.
just wanted to clarify, it's on, Mayor, members of the council, it's depicted as on the lead property, which was a former home site of Lennar,
Gotcha.
which is how the original encroachment agreement was put into place. We worked with city staff. So it's on, it's on the, it's on the west side of the property line, so it's not on the Tabor property.
Gotcha.
It's where it would be located.
Gotcha.
And so just to make it clear, because I've talked about it extensively with Jessica and Natalie, to answer your question about why a PUD amendment, is because the city, my understanding is the city doesn't want to grant a variance, because that's a permanent solution, right? But if a PUD amendment is granted, it allows for an interim solution, which is a 6-foot fence. The problem with a 6-foot fence is once you get into the front setback or into the right of way, the fence is supposed to be 4 feet. This is being driven between neighbors, and Lennar kind of got pulled in as a potential screening mechanism. We met out there last July, if you
Yep.
recall. So we kind of worked through, because the grade is a little bit weird, the property line, it drops off a few feet and there's a retaining wall. Ethan Tramp in our office, he's our day-to-day land development manager in Ravinia, has been talking to the property owners and trying to find a solution that's mutually agreeable for both. When I questioned the PUD amendment, because I did, it was explained to me of, well, the council would entertain this, to your point, not a perfect solution, but it's better than a variance.
Right.
Because the variance recognizes a hardship and presents a permanent solution, when ultimately that's not a permanent situation, because eventually the road could go through if the
Right.
property develops. So I hope that makes it all clear, but I thought that might shed a little,
Yeah.
background on it and
They-
maybe clarify a little bit of some of the questions that I was hearing.
But they could have a 4-foot fence and still be within code, couldn't they?
I think part of the conversation on that was that because of the grade doesn't really, it essentially would
Doesn't
be,
need the screening.
Yeah, there's no, the opacity also has to be less than 50% when it's in that front setback. So fences in that front setback are not meant for screening, it's more for containing or decorative.
and the road height versus the height on Tabor's property, I mean, you'd essentially, if it was a 4-foot fence, wouldn't get up to your feet. It really drops down. So I think that was to try to get some level of screening.
And a fence is not allowed in the right-of-way, period. So this also allows that fence to be built in our right-of-way, which we couldn't do with another means.
What about trees? 6-foot trees, same thing?
But planting them there?
Yeah, I'm not gonna beat a dead horse. I'm not gonna vote for it, because I don't think that we should allow 2 neighbors to decide that they're gonna break the code together.
Gotcha.
Would note that we did at the May 26th meeting, move forward, or recommend if they would come in with a PUD to move forward with that project. It was authorized to execute the encroachment agreement upon passage of a PUD amendment, so that was one, something that at the May 26th meeting.
I don't think I was there. But it doesn't have to go on forever. I'm sure I'll lose 3-1, so I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Sounds good. Any further discussion on that? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
3-1. Okay, thank you. And we'll go on to unfinished business. We have another public comment opportunity for 9A. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.
Which is a request for additional funding for the city park remaster planning.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. We started the City Park Remaster Planning project in 2019. Since then, we've done some significant work with the Parks and Trails Commission and Wank to move that forward. Due to some delays with COVID-19 in 2021, we asked council, or got some feedback from council to go out and get additional community feedback, and we hosted an open house in May, and as we are reviewing the finances and putting together the final pieces, we want to make sure that we have a budget to do that. So we're asking for use of up to $7,500 for Stantec to update the plans and budget numbers for the project so we can move forward with submitting a grant application, I believe, this fall.
Perfect.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
I support doing this. I also think we should consider expanding the scope of this kind of research. We've got a relatively small Parks and Recreation staff, but there's a lot of parks that need to get erected or updated. And I don't know that we have the bandwidth to maintain existing programming while also trying to use the park dedication funding that we have. And given the high inflation that we're seeing, the $1.5 million or so that we have in that account is kind of on fire, losing 10% of its value a year currently. So I'd like to see, we should do this, I think, but we should also look at what other parks do we need to start design work on so that we can start to use those funds for the benefits they're intended to construct before they lose more value.
Fair point. I think we have more than what we have in Park Dedication Fund long-term plan between City Park and Bellwether and the boardwalk. That
Yes.
chews through it pretty quick.
Yes, I think that even with the first phase of the city park master plan, we would need to find additional funding to fund all of that.
But, so were you thinking, well, along the lines of, I guess, what was your,
So the boardwalk, I think, is one we want to make sure we can move forward. I know that's on the agenda.
Yes.
The park we just talked about in the Tavera development, we could probably start looking at what that is going to look like. And then I know there's a couple open space parks that we haven't done much with yet.
one of them being Bellwether?
Yes.
One in Bellwether, yeah.
Being Bellwether, and then also the Ravinia, or the one in Ravinia. Are you, just for clarification's sake, are you looking for us to expand the scope of this project or come back with an RFP to do some additional planning?
I think come back with an understanding of, are we at risk of having a significant unspent balance that will lose significant value? Because if what you're saying is true, and through City Park Remaster, we're going to get that down to a level where it's a negligible loss, then there's not a need to act.
I think we'll be able to, if we wanted to spend all of that money, we could get that, City Park would
We
eat through
could
that very
certainly
quickly.
spend it all on City Park. Right now, we're thinking that the boardwalk in Bellwether, there's a portion that that we'll have to pay. We're estimating it being a $500,000 project. It would, correct?
With some
With
portion,
some
with city
portion
contribution.
of park dedication from Pulte, but then a fairly significant amount of city process or piece with that, and then having to construct the Tavera, the park in Tavera that we just talked about tonight, as well as those other open space parks. That
Yeah. I don't think.
If
the funds will be
JCB is
spent.
watching right now, she's jumping around the room. I agree with what you're saying, and the concept is, we shouldn't let that money sit and be stale. And the other concept is, like what you've talked about a bunch of times, is like, we need to think about moves for park stuff.
I don't think it'll be sitting there as long as it has been.
Yeah, our
projects we
goal
have
would be to
coming up.
move forward.
We bonded for City Park also.
We did bond it for the purchase of it.
Yeah. So that's also like, not to say that I'm advocating for that, but we did do that once upon a time too.
Do we know, I think I asked for this a few months ago, do we have anticipated future balance for that park dedication fund as additional things are final platted this year?
Yes, I think we have done, can follow up on that.
I guess that's part of my ask to
We start
staff
with
is to
that.
figure out.
Relating that to, that's
Yeah,
part
we've
of the
been trying to pull
Bellwether
together
plan.
some of the information so we can understand how, that's been part of the Bellwether Boardwalk, understanding what we have and what we need to allocate towards City Park, if that's ideally, we want that to be a 2023 project, and Bellwether, the Boardwalk and Bellwether, 2023 project.
Maybe a
as well.
winter project.
Maybe a winter project. So we are trying to move those projects forward.
Very good.
But we'll have a better idea shortly.
Yeah, we'll have some information in front of you for decisions related to those projects.
My last ask is, given inflation, are park dedication fees set appropriately to build the system that we have intended to build?
We are working on a review of that because we're taking into consideration what we currently have in there. That's what CB and I have been working on, looking at those numbers to get those looked at. So we'll hopefully in the next coming couple months have an update to the park dedication as well.
Very good.
So, I'm gonna add and ask. It's only things to think about, and it came out today. So when they released the economic numbers, housing starts were down on an annualized basis, I think 86%, which doesn't. I mean, it's only one quarter. You can't extrapolate one quarter's worth of data and say it's going to be that way all four of the next quarters. But I think it was like a 26% drop, a very huge drop in housing starts. And I'm planting the seed that I know you think about it, you have contingency plans, and it seems like maybe the contingency plan for a short-term slowdown in housing might be upon us. But no economist is that correct all the time, but those are the numbers. So just be aware of
Something to
that.
keep in mind, yeah.
Yeah.
Related to building costs, all of that stuff.
Can't find anybody.
Could be a whole ton of different things going on.
Economics, interest rates.
Yeah.
But every
inflation,
market is local
labor.
at the same time. So it'll be interesting to see
Yeah.
if that's true here.
Yeah.
We can take a look at number of building permits issued. That'll be something that as we look at next year's budget, we'll be taking into consideration where we were last year and where we are today.
And we're also starting to see some more commercial and industrial than we have in the past, and
True. All that's
brings in
true.
some too.
Yeah.
so.
That won't help with parks, but
Well,
a little bit.
yeah,
It's just something to think about. It's
For sure.
fresh news.
for sure. Okay, does someone want to make a motion?
I will move to approve.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
On to 10, I have another public comment opportunity for new business, item 10A, which is scheduling an EDA meeting. Someone feels very strongly on it.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. And we do have item.
And 10B, yes, sir.
The addition of an administrative assistant.
Right, yeah, that one might make more sense for comments.
So, Mayor and Council, we don't currently have anyone in the audience, but anyone joining us virtually can press *9 or click reactions and raise your hand. Here at this time, no one is doing so.
Okay.
Go into.
We'll go right into 10A, which is the EDA meeting. Does that time and date, August 11th at 5:15, I'm assuming that's just ahead of a work session?
15 minutes before our work session.
So quick meeting.
We
Can
do
I-
not anticipate a long.
Can I scratch the snacks part?
Oh, goodness, that is from an old.
Wait, what?
Yes, we haven't been doing that, so I won't plan on doing that. I apologize.
I did not see
It's under
this.
the financial and budget section of
Oh.
the staff report.
Okay.
Unless you would like me to, I can certainly bring that up. I've not been
Well, then,
currently.
not at the public's expense.
Yeah, I think we'll survive that 15 minutes without snacks.
Sounds good.
Good, then I will go ahead and call the EDA meeting for August 11th, 2022 at 5:15 PM.
So moved. Oh, never mind.
Yeah, I think we just
don't
need to
need
call
to
that, right? Yeah, perfect. Then 10B, which was added to the agenda.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Staff completed, asked for authorization to move forward with a hiring in May, and we received some applications, did interviews, and we would like to move forward with a preferred candidate. We're doing background and reference checks for the preferred candidate, but would like to move forward with authorizing an offer to get that person started.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Staff reports, planning applications, there's more coming up than there has been in the last, been quiet couple months, but
Yes, we do have we anticipate August has a couple planning items. August 25th, we are looking, right, Hennepin, that is August 11th, they're looking at, we're looking at doing that final plat. A note on that has changed at the Dajol's request, to remove the rest of the property from the plat. So that's just a note to council that will be a change at their request.
Is that gonna go through planning first?
It would
I'm
not.
totally joking.
Yeah, it will not go through, and if you are okay with
One
it,
more
we will
bite
put
at
it
it.
on consent, as we do not feel it is controversial, but if that is something you would like to see on.
Should be fine.
This is the third time.
Are we satisfied with the landscaping plan to adequately screen the fence? That was my only concern.
I believe so. And that would be in the packet, so if it's not something that you feel is adequate, then you could pull it from consent, but I do think they've addressed everything, made significant attempts to go through, to focus on the sides that we told them to, and I think they've done a really good job trying to do it. So.
Glad to hear it.
Could you make a request that the CEO doesn't lecture us before the meeting? I don't think that's in
I
it.
could try.
I don't think it's
Yeah,
what we need.
I don't know that I anticipate that they'll be in person for that. They may come, but.
Because yeah, okay.
And then Walcott Glen is on the 25th, and then we do have some additional planning items coming in September.
School will be in session come September, so be prepared.
It's gonna be busy. We anticipate we have several preliminary plats.
Yeah, I think we're gonna have a busy fall.
okay, sounds good. 11B, action steps update.
Yes,
What do
thank
we
you,
do it?
Mayor and Council. We're working towards moving forward on our goals. Yeah, we're making progress.
Good.
So we're excited to see that moving forward, and we'll continue to at least make progress with all the code updates. We might not have them all completely finished, but I think we're having a great discussion on how to improve our code and moving things forward.
Awesome. Okay, anything else?
No.
I was gonna look at the clock, we're 8:30, not even.
All right.
Awesome.
8:24.
I will entertain a motion to make a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Yo.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Think you'll get wind of that
Recording stopped.
comment?
Who? Oh, this right hand
We really don't need that guy to speak.
He didn't help himself.
So, the Hennepin County